I used to think sacrifice was the highest form of love. That if you gave up enough pieces of yourself for someone, they would see your worth and hold it close like something precious. 5 years. That's how long I spent pouring myself into us. 5 years of working overtime so he could rest. 5 years of declining promotions so he could take them instead. 5 years of carrying both of our dreams while pretending my own didn't matter. And now I sat in the boardroom, the air cold and sterile, my hands folded neatly in my lap even though I could feel my nails digging into my skin. On the far end of the table, my husband, my Liam, was smiling. Not at me, not for me, but at her, Scarlett. She wasn't even trying to hide her satisfaction. Her red lips curled in that perfect little smirk, her delicate fingers wrapped around the contract that had my name on it just yesterday. Liam's voice rang out, smooth and casual, as if he hadn't just stabbed me through the heart. Scarlett will be taking over the project from here on out. She's more suitable for the role, more suitable. I blinked, the words lodging in my chest like glass shards. This was my project. I had nurtured it from an idea scrawled on napkins to a full-blown, high-stakes corporate pitch that could secure millions in funding for the company. I had worked weekends, missed family gatherings, and pulled all-nighters until my eyes burned just to perfect it, and now he was handing it to his lover. I forced a polite smile because in business, emotions are weakness. But inside, I was screaming. Scarlett leaned closer to him, whispering something I couldn't hear, her manicured nails brushing his sleeve. They both laughed softly like I wasn't even in the room, like I hadn't just been erased from my own story. 5 years. 5 years of believing in him more than I believed in myself. 5 years of trusting that the man I married would protect my heart. Instead, he'd handed it to the one woman who had tried to ruin me before. When the meeting ended, I stayed in my chair, pretending to check my notes. Everyone filed out. Liam lingered for a moment, looking at me with that patronizing tilt of his head. "Don't take it personally, Claire," he said softly, almost like a friend consoling another. "It's just business, just business." The man who once swore he'd fight for me had just sold me off like a bad investment. That night, I walked home in the rain. I didn't take the car, he had borrowed it to take Scarlett out for a celebration dinner. Water soaked through my coat, but I barely noticed. My mind was replaying every moment of the past 5 years, like a cruel montage of my own foolishness. I remembered the time he forgot my birthday, but I still surprised him with tickets to his favorite game. The night I stayed up with him until sunrise, rewriting his speech for a conference so he wouldn't embarrass himself. The way I kept saying no to other opportunities because he convinced me we needed to focus on his career first, and every time I told myself it's worth it. We're a team. But tonight, that illusion shattered. By the time I reached our apartment, my hair was plastered to my face, my fingers numb from the cold. I unlocked the door to an empty living room. On the table was a note in his handwriting. "Don't wait up. Big night for Scarlett. She deserves it." I stared at the words until they blurred. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't cry. I just felt empty. But somewhere deep in that hollow space, a tiny ember began to glow. I didn't know it yet, but this was the night my life would change forever. The night that would lead me to my rebirth. Sleep never came that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint city glow seeping through the curtains. The sound of the rain outside had stopped hours ago, but my mind was a storm that refused to quiet. Every memory of the past 5 years returned to me, not as a sweet recollection, but as evidence. Evidence of my own blind devotion. I remembered the very first year of our marriage when Liam was struggling in his career. I was doing well in mine, already being considered for a promotion to project lead. He was insecure about the imbalance. And one night over dinner, he'd said, "Claire, maybe you could hold off on that promotion. Just for a year or two. Let me catch up. I want to feel like the man in this marriage." I told myself it was just temporary. I turned it down. Then there was the second year. His boss noticed my reports, the ones I stayed up late to edit and polish for Liam so he wouldn't embarrass himself in meetings. I remember hearing his boss say, "Your work has really improved." Liam smiled. But he never once mentioned my name. Year 3, I started covering his expenses too. He said he was investing in himself. I believed him. Year 4, I gave up the offer to move abroad for a senior role because he said we couldn't just leave when his career was finally taking off. And year 5, the year I poured my soul into this project. The project that was now sitting in Scarlett's hands. The ache in my chest grew sharper with every thought. It wasn't just betrayal, it was the realization that I had been a willing participant in my own undoing. My phone lit up at 1:42 a.m. A message from my friend Mia. "Mia, he's here, at Lucin's rooftop bar, with her." "Mia, Claire, I'm so sorry," I didn't reply. What was there to say? That I was surprised. That I didn't know. The truth was I had known for months. I had seen the way he looked at her, softer than the way he looked at me. I had seen the texts, the work dinners that didn't match the company schedule. But I had buried it under layers of excuses, because facing it meant facing the death of everything I'd built my life around. When Liam finally came home, just after a.m., I was sitting in the living room. I didn't turn on the lights. He walked in, smelling of expensive whiskey and Scarlett's perfume, sweet and sickening. He froze when he saw me. "Oh, you're still up." I said nothing. He tried to smile, like this was just another normal night. "Claire, you know how important tonight was for her. She's been through so much. She deserved this win." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it short, bitter, sharp. She deserved it. And what about me, Liam? Did I deserve anything in the past 5 years? His jaw tightened. "Don't make this about you. This is business. You're being unreasonable." Unreasonable. That word hit harder than the betrayal. Because it was the same word he had used every time I had a need, a dream, or a protest. Something in me broke then, not loudly, not with shouting or tears. It broke quietly, like a final thread snapping. I stood up, walked past him and closed the bedroom door behind me. It wasn't a fight. It was a funeral. And the woman I had been for the last 5 years was gone. The next morning, the apartment felt like a stranger's home. I moved through the rooms without touching anything, like I was afraid even the furniture might accuse me of being foolish. Liam was already in the kitchen, humming, like last night hadn't happened. "Morning," he said, sliding a coffee mug toward me. "You have the day off, right? Maybe you could run some errands, pick up my suit from the dry cleaner, grab some groceries." I stared at him. He didn't notice the look in my eyes because he wasn't looking at me. He was scrolling through his phone, smiling at something, probably a message from her. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Liam, I need to understand something." Why her? Why did you give her my project?" He didn't even pause. "Because she's better suited. More charming. You can be a little cold in meetings, Claire. People like her She knows how to make them feel good. I laughed humorless, sharp. So 5 years of my work means nothing, because I'm not as good at batting my eyelashes. His tone hardened. Don't twist my words. You've been distant lately. And honestly, you've lost some spark. Maybe this will give you a chance to breathe. You've been so uptight. The gaslight flickered so brightly, I almost believed him. Almost. I put the coffee down without drinking it. Tell me, Liam, are you sleeping with her? His eyes flicked up then, his smile fading. That's not relevant. That was my answer. My chest tightened. Not from heartbreak, no. That had been last night. This was rage. You took everything from me, I said quietly. Every opportunity, every dream. And I let you. I chose you over myself. Again and again. Because I believed we were building something together. But it turns out, the only thing I was building was a throne for you to hand over to her. He rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember grabbing my bag. I only remember the sound of my own voice saying, I can't breathe here. The rest of the day blurred. I walked aimlessly through the city until the winter tugged my face. I ended up at Mia's apartment, collapsing into her arms without a word. She didn't ask questions. She just made me tea and sat with me until night fell. But when I went home, the confrontation wasn't over. Liam was waiting in the living room, his voice low and dangerous. You embarrassed me today, Claire. Scarlett told me you were rude to her at the office. I froze. Rude? I barely spoke to her. She's just trying to help you, he snapped. But you've become bitter. I can't have that energy around me. If you can't be supportive, maybe you should think about what you're contributing to this marriage. Something inside me snapped cleanly then. 5 years of swallowing my own pain. 5 years of convincing myself it was love. All of it condensed into one white-hot second. The room tilted. My ears rang. And then darkness. When I opened. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The ceiling above me wasn't ours, it was cream-colored, with a faint water stain in the corner, the kind I used to stare at during my old apartment days before marriage. I sat up sharply, my heart hammering. The bed wasn't our king-size one with the cold empty space beside me. It was the small, lumpy mattress I'd owned in my 20s. The sheets were the same faded floral pattern I'd bought on clearance, and then I saw it. The calendar on the wall, 5 years earlier. Exactly 1 week before I'd turned down that first promotion for Liam, my breath caught. No, this wasn't possible. I stumbled to the bathroom mirror, gripping the counter until my knuckles went white. The woman staring back at me was younger, fresher. No deep lines from sleepless nights. No hollow shadows under the eyes. Her eyes, my eyes, were still bright, though wide with shock. I ran my hands over my face, my hair, my arms. It was all real. This wasn't a dream. Memories of last night, of Liam's betrayal, of Scarlett's smirk slammed into me like a wave. And yet, here I was, 5 years before it all fell apart. I sank to the floor, trembling. If this was real, I had been given the one thing I thought was impossible: time, a second chance. The doorbell rang, jolting me out of my thoughts. I knew exactly who it was before I even opened the door. Liam. Younger, less polished, but still with that same smile that had once melted me. The smile that now made my stomach turn. Claire, he said warmly, holding out a coffee. Thought you might need a pick-me-up before the big meeting today. I remembered this day with painful clarity. In my first life, this was the morning He'd convinced me to turn down my promotion so he could take a shot at a client pitch instead. I'd said yes without hesitation, but this time, I forced a polite smile and took the coffee, my voice calm. Thanks. And Liam. About that promotion, he blinked. Oh, right. You were going to talk to your boss today. But we agreed no, I said softly, cutting him off. We didn't agree. I did what you asked without thinking about myself. That's not going to happen this time. His brows knitted. What do you mean this time? I held his gaze, steady. I mean I'm taking it. My career matters. Too. He opened his mouth, then closed it, confused. I could almost see the wheels turning. This wasn't the Claire he knew. The Claire who bent without question. And as I closed the door behind him, my hand still trembling, I whispered to myself, this time, I live for me. The first thing I learned about second chances is that they aren't loud. They don't announce themselves with fanfare or warning. They whisper. And if you're smart, you whisper back. I didn't wake up and declare war on Liam. That would have been reckless. Instead, I began quietly redrawing the lines of my life, one deliberate choice at a time. At work, I accepted the promotion without hesitation. In my first life, I had called my boss to turn it down before even going to the meeting. This time, I walked into his office, smiled and said, yes, I'd be honored. The look on his face told me he had half expected me to refuse again. Good, he said, leaning back in his chair. You've earned it, Claire. Don't let anyone talk you out of what you deserve. I carried that sentence like armor. With Liam, I kept things polite, not cold, just different. I stopped rearranging my schedule to fit his. If he wanted to meet for lunch, I said, sorry, I'm booked. If he asked me to edit his reports, I smiled and said, I'm sure you'll do fine. The first few times he laughed it off. But as the weeks passed, confusion began to cloud his expression. Scarlett, however, was different. In my first life, she had floated into our world like a harmless butterfly, soft-spoken, sweet, pretending to be my friend while sliding into his orbit. Now, with my new eyes, I saw the strategy in every move she made. She'd linger after meetings, accidentally touching his arm. She'd compliment me in front of others, then subtly undermine me when no one else was listening. Once, she even sent me a link to a job in another city, smiling as she called it a great opportunity. In my first life, I might have laughed nervously and considered it. This time, I simply tilted my head and said, thanks, Scarlett, but I'm not going anywhere. The truth was, I was building something she couldn't touch. After work, instead of going straight home to cook dinner for Liam, I attended industry networking events. I reconnected with old contacts, reignited friendships I'd let wither away. And quietly, without telling anyone, not even Mia, I began developing a side project. It wasn't glamorous yet, just sketches, research notes, late-night brainstorming sessions. But I knew where it could lead. In my first life, I had buried this idea under Liam's needs. In this life, it would become my escape. I was careful not to show my hand. I still smiled when Liam talked about his dreams. I still let him believe I was in his corner. But for the first time in years, my corner was my own. It was strange living alongside a man I knew would betray me. Like watching a movie I'd already seen, waiting for the plot twist everyone else thought was shocking. But I wasn't going to stop the twist from coming. I was just going to make sure it destroyed him, not me. In my first life, Scarlett didn't make her real move until Liam and I were deeply entangled when walking away felt impossible. But in this life, she struck much sooner. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I had just wrapped a client presentation when Scarlett appeared in my doorway, wearing a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Claire," she said sweetly, leaning against the frame, "I heard from Liam that you've been so busy lately. I thought I'd help lighten your load." She held out a folder. Inside were drafts of a proposal, my proposal marked up with her suggestions in bright red ink. In my first life, I would have thanked her, taken the papers, and swallowed my irritation until it rotted me from the inside. But this time, I simply smiled. "That's thoughtful of you, Scarlett," I said, sliding the folder back across the desk. "But I don't need help with this project." Her smile faltered. "Oh, I just thought you thought wrong," I said gently, keeping my tone friendly but firm. "I'm more than capable of handling my own work." "But I appreciate the enthusiasm." For a split second, her eyes narrowed, the sweetness slipping. Then she recovered, laughing lightly as if we were sharing some inside joke. "Of course, I wouldn't dream of stepping on your toes." But I knew that was exactly what she was trying to do. That night, I didn't go home right away. I met with an old mentor, someone I had lost touch with in my first life because Liam didn't like me spending time with people who made me think about leaving the company. Over dinner, I told my mentor about my side project in broad strokes. Enough to spark his interest, but not enough for him to see the full picture. By the time I left the restaurant, he had offered to connect me with 2 investors. It was a small step, but it was mine. When I finally got home, Liam was there, lounging on the couch. "Scarlett told me she offered to help you with your project," he said, sipping his drink. "You should take her up on it. She's got a good head for this stuff." I set my bag down calmly. "I don't need her help, Liam." He frowned. "You've been awfully defensive lately." I tilted my head. "Or maybe I've just stopped letting people take credit for my work." For a moment, silence stretched between us. He didn't like this version of me, this version that wasn't bending over backwards for him. But instead of arguing, he just muttered something under his breath and turned back to the TV. I went to bed that night with an odd feeling one I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the kind that screams. The kind that waits. Because I knew the truth. Scarlett thought she was moving in on my territory early this time. But in reality, she was walking straight into my trap. The first big change in my second life wasn't something anyone could see. It was the way I carried myself. I no longer entered rooms quietly, trying not to take up space. I walked in like I belonged there because I did. The promotion had given me authority, but my rebirth had given me something better: certainty. Within a month, I'd taken ownership of 2 high-profile projects. In my first life, Liam had pressured me to share them with Scarlett. Translation: hand them over entirely. This time, I didn't give either of them the chance. At meetings, I spoke first. Not loudly, not aggressively, just clearly and with purpose. I saw the surprise on colleagues' faces when I cut through corporate noise with solutions instead of suggestions. Scarlett, of course, tried to match me. If I presented an idea, she'd tack on a building on what Claire said, with a twist that made it hers. But every time, I made sure the credit was crystal clear. Well, as I outlined earlier, I begin sliding the attention right back where it belonged. It wasn't just about work. I started making small changes outside the office too. I traded evenings waiting on Liam for dinners with people who inspired me. I signed up for a weekend workshop in digital strategy, an area I knew would be the future of our industry. In my first life, I'd skipped it because Liam didn't want me wasting Saturdays on boring classes. And that side project, it was no longer just sketches and notes. It was a living, breathing plan, something that, if nurtured, could give me independence so complete I'd never have to rely on anyone's approval again. The first real proof that my path was changing came at the quarterly review. My division's revenue was up 18%, and my projects accounted for nearly half that growth. The director I caught Scarlett's jaw tighten in my peripheral vision. Liam's applause was slow, his smile forced. That night, he tried to reclaim ground. "You've been working a lot lately," he said, brushing my hair back. "Don't forget about us." In my first life, I would have melted, apologized, and promised to scale back. This time I smiled. "I haven't forgotten. But you'll have to meet me halfway, Liam." He blinked, unprepared for the boundary. And for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not love, not desire, unease, because he could feel it. The balance was shifting. The first signs were small. Too small for anyone else to notice, but I'd lived this before. I knew the pattern. Liam and Scarlett started accidentally being in the same places, staying late at the office on the same nights, lingering by the coffee machine with hushed voices, and just a little too much laughter. In my first life, I'd brushed it off as paranoia. Back then, I trusted them both. This time, I simply took note. The truth was, I wasn't here to stop them. I wasn't even here to save the marriage. I was here to save myself. Teamwork. I kept delivering wins, each one bigger than the last. Every time my name was mentioned in meetings, I saw Scarlett's smile tighten, the muscles in her jaw twitch. Liam, meanwhile, started slipping subtle digs into conversations. "You've been lucky with these projects," he'd say casually, as if my success was an accident. I didn't argue. I let him believe whatever story kept his ego intact. Because the more he underestimated me, the more room I had to move unseen. One Friday evening, I walked past the conference room and caught a glimpse of them inside. Liam leaning in, Scarlett touching his arm, her voice low and coaxing. They didn't see me. I could have interrupted. I could have called him out right then and there. But instead, I kept walking, my heels clicking against the floor like a metronome, marking time. That night, I treated myself to dinner at a small rooftop restaurant across town. Alone. Not lonely. As I sipped my wine, I thought about the woman I'd been in my first life, the one who would have gone home and cried, demanded explanations, begged for reassurance. That woman had been so desperate to keep what she thought was love that she'd handed over everything else. Not this time. This time, I was letting the cracks form. Because cracks led to collapse. And collapse leads to freedom. I went home late, the city lights still warm in my mind. Liam was already asleep. But on his phone, half hidden under a pillow, was a message. Notification from Scarlett. Past midnight. I smiled to myself as I turned off the light. Let them play their game. I'd already chosen mine. The funny thing about betrayal is that it's loud for the people doing it. They think they're whispering, but the world can hear the rustle of their secrets. Liam and Scarlett thought they were subtle. To anyone else, maybe they were. But I could hear it in the way Scarlett's voice softened when she said his name. I could see it in the way Liam's eyes darted when I walked into a room. In my first life, their secrecy had been a knife to my heart. Now it was a map, and I intended to follow it straight to my advantage. I started by shifting the balance of power at work. Whenever Scarlett tried to insert herself into my projects, I'd redirect her gently but firmly toward tasks that seemed important but were actually busy work. She thought she was getting a foot in the door. In reality, I was walking her down a hallway that led nowhere. With Liam, I became unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, never giving him the emotional stability he had grown used to. People like Liam crave control, and when they can't get it from you, they start making mistakes. One afternoon, I accidentally left a folder on my desk marked confidential investor proposal. It was real enough to look legitimate but vague enough that it gave nothing away. When I came back from lunch, it had been moved. Liam denied touching it. I didn't press. I wanted him curious. That curiosity was my bait. The second part of my countermove was more personal. I started building a network outside of the company: investors, freelancers, creative directors. In my first life, Liam had been my only partner in everything. This time, I was weaving a safety net so strong that no fool could break me. Meanwhile, I made sure Liam and Scarlett's meetings didn't go unnoticed, not by confronting them, but by casually mentioning them to others in passing. Oh, I think Liam and Scarlett were working late on that, I'd say, smiling as if it were nothing. Little seeds, planted in the right ears. Seeds have a way of growing on their own. The real test came at the end of the month, when Liam invited me to a team dinner. I almost laughed when I saw Scarlett there, seated right beside him. They thought they were controlling the scene, but I had already slipped my hand onto the wheel. The restaurant buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses, but I felt nothing but a calm focus. Tonight was a test not just of patience, but of who really held control. Liam greeted me with a tight smile, his eyes flicking toward Scarlett, who was already perched next to him, radiating fake sweetness. She leaned in, whispering something that made him chuckle softly. I took my seat at the table, letting my gaze sweep over the group. Colleagues I had worked with for years, unaware of the undercurrents beneath the surface. As the meal progressed, Scarlett tried to dominate the conversation, peppering the room with rehearsed anecdotes and flattering Liam's leadership. But I held my ground. When she directed a compliment toward me, I returned it with a smile sharp enough to cut. Scarlett's enthusiasm is impressive, I said, voice smooth. It's wonderful to see fresh energy in the team. Scarlett blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Liam stiffened beside her, sensing the shift. Throughout dinner, I shared stories of recent successes, projects I had led, connections I had made, dropping names of investors and mentors who would soon be backing my side project. The room listened. I could see the admiration flicker in some eyes. Liam's smile faded further. Scarlett's lips pressed into a thin line. Later, as dessert was served, Liam leaned toward me, voice low and clipped. You're making this difficult. I looked him squarely in the eyes. Maybe it's time I did. Scarlett's glare burned into my side like a warning. But I was done being afraid. When the night ended, I walked out alone into the cool air, feeling lighter than I had in years. This wasn't just a dinner. It was my declaration. I wasn't the woman who would fade away quietly anymore. I was the storm they never saw coming. The days after the dinner felt different, charged, electric, like the calm before a storm. Word was spreading quietly about my growing influence. Colleagues I barely spoke to before now sought my advice. Investors I'd met through my side project reached out with interest and encouragement. I was becoming someone people wanted to know, someone who mattered. Liam's usual confident, Swagger started to falter. In meetings, his remarks grew sharper, his smiles forced. Scarlett was more aggressive too, her attempts to undermine me more blatant but clumsier. One afternoon, I overheard a whispered conversation in the hallway. Liam and Scarlett, voices low, tense. "You don't think she suspects, do you? She's too smart for that. We have to be careful." A small smile tugged at my lips. They saw me as a threat now, and I welcomed it. Meanwhile, I balanced my day job with the slow, steady growth of my side project. It was no longer just a backup plan. It was becoming my future. At home, Liam's attempts to reconnect grew desperate. Late-night calls, messages filled with apologies and promises. But I held firm, because this time, I knew my worth. I wasn't the woman who would sacrifice everything for someone who couldn't see her. I was someone who could walk away and thrive. The turning tide was here, and I was ready to ride it all the way. Weeks passed, and the fragile balance began to shatter. One morning, I arrived at the office to find Liam and Scarlett locked in a heated conversation by the elevators. Their voices dropped to whispers when they saw me approach, but the tension hung thick in the air. Later that day, Liam cornered me in the hallway. "Claire, we need to talk. All of this is getting out of hand." I looked him straight in the eyes. Too late for that. That evening, Scarlett sent me a message, thinly veiled threats masked as polite warnings. "Be careful, Claire. Not everything is as it seems." I smiled to myself. The game was on. I began accelerating my side project, meeting with investors, hiring consultants, preparing to launch something that would change everything. Liam's coldness turned to anger. Scarlett's smiles grew sharper, more forced. But I stood firm, steady, and unbreakable, because this time, I wasn't just fighting. The moment I decided to break free was neither sudden nor reckless. It was a slow-burning realization that the life I had was a cage and the key was in my hands. I officially submitted my resignation one crisp morning. The email was brief, but pointed. No explanations, no apologies. The shock on Liam's face when I told him was a moment I'll never forget. "Why now?" he demanded. "Because I'm done waiting," I replied, calm and certain. The company was a small world and rumors spread fast. Some sympathized, others whispered about betrayal and bitterness. But I felt something else: relief. For the first time in years, I was walking toward something new instead of running from something old. My side project launched within weeks. It wasn't perfect, but it was minor testament to my resilience and vision. Investors believed in me. Clients trusted me. And most importantly, I believed in myself. Liam and Scarlett faded into the background of my life. Like a bad chapter I'd closed, I wasn't just reborn. I was unstoppable. The morning sun streamed through the window, warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold nights I'd endured. I sat at my new desk, surrounded by sketches, contracts, and the buzz of possibilities. This was my world now. Gone were the days of sacrifices made for a love that didn't hold me. Gone was the weight of unspoken betrayals. In their place was freedom, hard-earned and fiercely protected. I often think back to that moment when I woke up 5 years younger, with a chance to rewrite my story. It wasn't easy. It was painful. And sometimes it was terrifying, but it was worth it, because I learned that true love doesn't ask you to give up yourself. True love builds you up, lets you shine, and never asks you to dim your light. And if love isn't like that, then maybe it's not love at all. I'm clear now, reborn, empowered and ready for whatever comes next. This is just the beginning. Months had passed since I walked away from everything I thought defined me. I'd built a thriving business, a circle of friends who saw me for who I truly was, and a life that felt authentically mine. One afternoon, I found myself standing outside the office building where it all began, the place where I had sacrificed so much for Liam's dreams, where I'd been replaced and forgotten. Instead of anger, I felt gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that woke me up. Gratitude for the second chance I'd been given. Gratitude for the strength I discovered within myself. Sometimes, life's hardest betrayals are the catalysts we need to find our true path. I smiled, stepping away from the building, feeling lighter than ever. The woman I was before is a part of me, but she no longer controls my story. Because now, I'm writing it myself, and it's a story of courage, rebirth, and unshakable self-love. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. Please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one.